The espresso machine screamed behind me, drowning out the clatter of dishes and the low murmur of conversations that filled Marcello's every Friday night. My hands trembled as I balanced the tray. 3 appetizers that cost more than my weekly rent, destined for table 12. The couple there hadn't looked at me once. Not when I brought water. Not when I recited the specials in my careful, broken English. I was invisible to them, just another struggling immigrant trying to survive in a city that chewed up girls like me and spit them out. My name is Amara Okafor, and tonight, like every other night for the past 2 years, I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. The accent was deliberate, the fractured sentences carefully constructed. In this restaurant, in this glittering world of crystal chandeliers and champagne that cost more than I made in a month, being the poor black girl who barely spoke English meant I was safe, overlooked, dismissed. Nobody paid attention to the help, especially when the help seemed too simple to understand their secrets. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The kitchen doors swung open with a violence that made me flinch. Marco, the floor manager, grabbed my elbow with fingers that dug into bone. His breath reeked of the cigarettes he chain-smoked in the alley between shifts, and his eyes held that manic gleam that meant someone important had just walked in. "Table 7, he hissed, his grip tightening when I tried to pull away. "VIP, top tier. You smile, you serve, you don't speak unless spoken to. Capisci?" I understood perfectly, but I just nodded with that vacant expression I'd perfected. Marco needed to believe I was simple, that I was grateful for this job that paid under minimum wage and demanded I accept the wandering hands and degrading comments as part of the service. Table 7, the corner booth with the view of both exits. The table that was always reserved, always empty, until men in expensive suits arrived with dead eyes and dangerous smiles. I'd served there 3 times before, and each time I'd collected tips that felt like hush money, payment for forgetting faces and conversations I wasn't supposed to understand. But tonight was different. I felt it the moment I turned toward that corner of the restaurant. The air pressure dropped like a storm rolling in off the ocean. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they changed pitch. People's gazes flickered toward the booth and then away quickly, as if direct eye contact might turn them to stone. He sat with his back against the wall, and even from across the dining room, I could see the way shadows seemed to gather around him like loyal dogs. Dark suit that probably cost more than my car. Darker hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble by an artist who understood that beauty could be lethal. 2 men flanked him, positioned by the bar and near the entrance, their eyes constantly moving, hands resting near their jackets in a way that made my throat tight. This wasn't just VIP. This was power. This was danger wrapped in Armani and Italian leather shoes that had probably walked through blood. I picked up the wine list with hands that wanted to shake and forced them steady. Forced my breathing to even out. Forced my face into that blank, pleasant expression that had kept me employed and alive in this city that had no mercy for girls like me. Each step across the marble floor felt like walking toward the edge of a cliff, knowing I was going to fall, but unable to stop my feet from moving forward. The scent hit me first. Expensive cologne, something with notes of bergamot and cedar mixed with leather, and something else. Something that smelled like violence and old money and secrets buried in concrete. "Buonasera," I said softly, my eyes lowered in the submissive posture Marco had drilled into all of us, my accent deliberately thick, my vowels rounded wrong. "You like wine? I bring list." He didn't respond immediately. I could feel his gaze on me, heavy and assessing, like he was cataloging every detail of my face, my body, my obvious foreignness. When he finally spoke, his voice was gravel wrapped in silk, smooth and dangerous. "English?" he asked, amusement coloring the single word. "I try," I said, adding a nervous laugh that wasn't entirely fake. "Still learning, very hard." One of his men approached, the one who'd been stationed by the bar. Built like a concrete wall poured into a tailored suit, he leaned down and whispered something in rapid Italian. I kept my expression blank, vapid, even as I understood every single word. "Boss, Castellano's people are getting restless. They want an answer tonight about the shipment." The man at the table, the boss, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His fingers, long and elegant and terrifying, drummed against the white tablecloth in an irregular rhythm that set my nerves on edge. Then he spoke, his words casual, dismissive, devastating. "Questa stupida ragazza probabilmente non sa nemmeno contare fino a 10. Find someone with a brain this time, Antonio." This stupid girl probably can't even count to 10. The words hit me like a slap, sharp and cold and infuriating. He was talking about me like I was furniture, like I was too simple and too beneath his notice to possibly understand the language that had been my refuge, my secret weapon, my connection to the grandmother who raised me in Lagos after my mother died. The grandmother who'd married an Italian diplomat and filled our home with the music of two languages, two cultures, two worlds that somehow made sense together. Every instinct screamed at me to stay quiet, to swallow this insult like I'd swallowed thousands of others, to remain invisible and safe in my carefully constructed disguise. But 2 years of being treated like I was less than human, 2 years of biting my tongue until it bled, 2 years of making myself small and stupid and grateful for scraps, something inside me snapped. I lifted my head, met his eyes directly, and spoke in perfect, fluent Italian, my accent impeccable, my words chosen with surgical precision. "Il Barolo del 2016 sarebbe perfetto con il brasato di manzo che lo chef sta preparando stasera," I said, my voice steady, despite the way my heart threatened to break through my ribs. "A meno che non preferisca qualcosa di più forte, considerando la serata difficile che sembra stare avendo." The Barolo from 2016 would be perfect with the braised beef the chef is preparing tonight, unless you prefer something stronger, considering the difficult evening you seem to be having. The silence that followed was absolute, total, the kind of silence that happens when the world stops spinning for just a moment, when reality shifts on its axis and nothing will ever be the same again. His eyes locked onto mine, and I watched something dangerous flicker in their depths. Surprise first, sharp and genuine. Then interest, dark and assessing. Then something else I couldn't name. Something that made my skin prickle and my breath catch, and every nerve ending in my body scream both run and stay closer. Antonio tensed beside him, his hand moving inside his jacket toward what I knew was a weapon. The other guard had already started moving from his position near the entrance. Every muscle in my body screamed to flee, but I stood frozen, trapped in the boss's gaze like a rabbit who'd just revealed herself to the wolf. "Lei parla italiano," he said softly, his voice dropping to something quieter and somehow infinitely more threatening. "Perfettamente." She speaks Italian, perfectly. "Si." I forced myself not to look away, not to show the fear that was flooding my system like ice water. "Mia nonna era di Napoli. Ha sposato mio nonno di Lagos. Credeva nell'insegnare sua nipote correttamente, anche se è solo una cameriera stupida." Yes. My grandmother was from Naples. She married my grandfather from Lagos. She believed in teaching her granddaughter properly, even if she's just a stupid waitress. A muscle ticked in his jaw. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. I could feel Marco's panic radiating from across the room, could sense the other diners pretending not to watch, could taste my own fear sharp and metallic on my tongue. Then he smiled, and it was the most beautiful, terrifying thing I'd ever seen, like watching the sun rise over a battlefield, gorgeous and deadly and wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. "Siediti," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him with a casual wave that somehow carried the weight of absolute command. "I'm working," I managed in Italian, my voice steadier than I felt. "Siediti." Not a request this time. A command from someone who'd never been disobeyed, who couldn't even conceive of disobedience as a possibility. My legs moved before my brain could catch up. I found myself sliding into the leather booth, the wine list forgotten on the table between us, my entire body vibrating with adrenaline and terror and something else I didn't want to examine. This close, I could see everything. The scar that cut through his left eyebrow, pale against olive skin, the way his pupils dilated slightly as they traced my face with an intensity that felt physical. The gold ring on his right hand, heavy and ornate, catching the light with promises of violence. The way he smelled, cologne and danger, and something that made my pulse race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "Come ti chiami?" he asked, his voice sliding back into English now, his accent thick and musical and dangerous. "What's your name?" "Amara." It came out barely above a whisper. "Amara." He tested my name on his tongue like he was tasting expensive wine, rolling the syllables around his mouth. Amara who speaks perfect Italian and plays stupid to survive. Amara who corrects me in my own language. Amara who has more courage than sense. "I should apologize," I started, but he cut me off with a sharp gesture. "No. You should never apologize for being intelligent, for refusing to make yourself smaller so small men can feel bigger." His eyes burned into mine. It's refreshing. Dangerous, but refreshing. One of his phones buzzed on the table. One of 3 devices lined up like weapons. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened, something cold and lethal sliding behind his eyes like a mask. Without looking away from me, he spoke to Antonio in rapid Italian. "Tell Castellano if he wants to meet, he comes here. On my terms, in my territory. And he comes alone or he doesn't come at all." Antonio nodded and disappeared, speaking urgently into his own phone. We were alone now, or as alone as someone like him ever was, with guards hovering like shadows and the entire restaurant acutely aware of his presence. "You work here every night?" he asked, his attention returning to me with a focus that made my skin prickle. "Wednesday through Sunday," I said, then added, "I have another job during the day, cleaning offices downtown." Something flickered in his expression. Not pity exactly, but something close, something that looked almost like anger on my behalf. "Family in America?" The question felt like a test. "Just me now. My grandmother passed 3 years ago, before I came here." The shift in his expression was subtle but unmistakable. A crack in the marble, there and gone so fast I might have imagined it. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. "Mi dispiace. I'm sorry." The sincerity surprised me more than anything else that had happened tonight. This man, this clearly dangerous, powerful, lethal man, sounded almost human for a moment, almost vulnerable. "What's your name?" I asked before I could stop myself, before fear could silence the question. His smile returned, sharp and knowing and possessive. "You don't know? Should I?" He studied me for a long moment, those dark eyes seeing too much, cataloging every detail of my confusion with something that looked strangely like relief. "Dante," he finally said. "Dante Marchesi." The name meant nothing to me. I watched him watch me, saw the way he registered my genuine ignorance with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between satisfaction and disappointment. You don't know who I am," he said softly, almost to himself. "Should I?" I repeated, feeling like I was missing something crucial, some piece of information that would make all of this make sense. Before he could answer, Marco materialized at the table, his face pale and slick with sweat, his hands trembling as he wrung them together. "Mr. Marchesi, I apologize profusely for any—" "She stays," Dante said, without looking at him, his voice carrying that casual authority that made grown men flinch. "No one bothers her. No one speaks to her. No one even looks at her unless I say otherwise. Understood?" Of course, of course." Marco bobbed his head like a puppet on strings, his eyes finding mine with a mixture of confusion, fear, and something that might have been jealousy. "Whatever you need, Mr. Marchesi." But I wasn't looking at Marco. I was trapped in Dante's gaze again, feeling like I'd just stepped into something vast and dark and inescapable, something that would change everything. "Amara," he said my name again, softer this time, almost possessive, like he was claiming it. "Do you know what happens to people who speak to me the way you did?" My throat went dry. "No, neither do I." His smile was dangerous and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. "Because no one has dared in a very long time. Most people know better. Most people know exactly who I am and what I'm capable of." He reached across the table, and I held my breath as his fingers, warm and calloused despite their elegance, tilted my chin up slightly. The touch was both threatening and intimate, possessive in a way that made heat pool low in my stomach, even as fear made my hands shake. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Tesoro," he murmured. "Maybe both," I whispered. "Good." His thumb brushed across my jawline. A touch that branded me, claimed me, changed something fundamental in the air between us. "I like both. I can work with both." Then his phone buzzed again, insistent and urgent. He released me with what looked like reluctance and answered it with a curse in Italian that would have made my grandmother smack him. The conversation was rapid fire, full of words I recognized. Problem, warehouse, police, complications. His expression shifted from annoyance to cold fury in the space between heartbeats, and I watched him transform from the man who'd been touching me with something almost like tenderness to something else entirely. Something that explained the fear in Marco's eyes and the guns under his guards' jackets. He stood abruptly, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced efficiency, already moving, already elsewhere. "I have to go," he said, his voice clipped. "Business that can't wait." Relief and strange, irrational disappointment warred in my chest. Of course. But he wasn't done. He pulled out a card, matte black with gold lettering. Just a name and a number, elegant and simple and expensive. He placed it in my hand, and his fingers closed over mine, trapping the card between our palms, his skin warm and slightly rough. "You call me if anyone gives you trouble," he said, his voice dropping to something dark and promising. "Anyone. Marco, the customers, the men who follow you home from the bus stop. Anyone. Understood?" The fact that he knew about the men who'd started tracking my route home should have terrified me. Instead, it sent a different kind of shiver down my spine. "I don't need Amara." His grip tightened just enough to make his point without causing pain. Just enough to remind me that gentleness was a choice for him, not a limitation. "Yes or no?" "Yes." "Brava ragazza." "Good girl." The words sent an inappropriate flush of heat through my body. He released my hand and turned to leave, Antonio and the other guard materializing from the shadows to flank him. At the door, he stopped and looked back at me across the restaurant. Our eyes met, and I saw something in his expression that made my blood run cold and hot simultaneously. A promise, a warning, a claim that he had no right to make but was making anyway. Then he was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of his cologne and a black card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my trembling hand. Marco grabbed my arm the moment the door closed, his fingers digging in, hard enough to bruise. "What the fuck did you do?" he hissed, his face twisted with fury and fear. "Do you have any idea who that was? Do you have any concept of what you've just gotten yourself into?" But I couldn't answer, because I was staring at the card, at the name embossed in gold letters, Dante Marchesi, and beneath it, a number I knew I should never call, but also knew I wouldn't be able to stop myself from calling. The espresso machine hissed again, pulling me back to reality. But reality had shifted somehow, tilted on its axis. The air tasted different, sharper, electric. My skin felt too tight, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made either the biggest mistake of my life or somehow, impossibly, I'd just saved it. I slipped the card into my apron pocket, feeling it burn against my hip like a brand, like a promise, like the beginning of something I didn't understand but could already feel pulling me under. What had I done? If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The weekend passed in a haze of obsessive anxiety and replaying every moment of Friday night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, those dark, dangerous eyes that had looked at me like I was simultaneously the most interesting and most fragile thing he'd ever encountered. The black card had moved from my work apron to my jeans pocket, to my coat, to under my pillow, always there, always burning like a secret I couldn't share and didn't fully understand. By Sunday night, I'd Googled the name. My ancient laptop had taken forever to load the results, the Wi-Fi in my apartment building barely functional on the best days. What I found made my blood freeze in my veins. Page after page of news articles, most in Italian, some in English, a few in languages I didn't recognize. Marchesi crime family, alleged mafia boss, federal investigation, racketeering charges that never seemed to stick. Photos of him in expensive suits, always surrounded by lawyers, always with that same cold, beautiful face that gave nothing away. One article mentioned his father, Vittorio Marchesi, who'd been gunned down outside a restaurant 4 years ago. Dante had taken over at 26, consolidating power with what the journalists called unprecedented ruthlessness and strategic brilliance. The article included testimony from a detective who'd spent a decade trying to build a case against the family. Dante Marchesi is the most dangerous kind of criminal. He's smart, patient, and absolutely without mercy when someone crosses him. I'd insulted a mafia boss, corrected him, sat across from him like an equal. By all rights, I should be terrified. I was terrified. But I was also something else. Something I didn't want to examine too closely because it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and wanting to jump just to feel the fall. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, rain turning the city into a watercolor painting of misery. I had the day off from the restaurant, which meant 16 hours at the office cleaning company, scrubbing toilets and emptying trash cans in buildings where people made more in an hour than I made in a month. My phone rang at noon while I was on my knees scrubbing coffee stains out of a break room carpet. Unknown number. I stared at it for 3 rings, my heart hammering, before answering. Amara, not a question. His voice dark and certain, and absolutely sure I'd answer. My heart stopped, started again too fast. How did you get my number? I own the restaurant. A pause, heavy with meaning. Among other things, I'm outside. The words hit me like ice water. I scrambled to my feet, crossed to the window. 23 floors down, a black SUV sat at the curb, windows tinted dark, engine running, rain streaming down the glass. I could make out shapes inside, shadows that watched and waited. "This is crazy," I whispered into the phone. "Probably." I could hear amusement in his voice, and something else. Something possessive that made my skin prickle with awareness. "But you're going to come down anyway, aren't you?" "Why would I do that?" "Because you've been thinking about Friday night just as much as I have." His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "Because you're curious. Because you Googled my name and now you know exactly what I am. And you're still on the phone instead of hanging up and blocking this number." He was right, and I hated him for it. Hated how easily he read me, how he seemed to see straight through the careful walls I'd built around myself. 5 minutes, I said, and hung up before I could change my mind, before rational thought could overpower the pull I felt toward this dangerous, impossible man. I told my supervisor I was sick, that I needed to leave early. She barely looked up from her phone, just waved me away with the casual dismissal I'd grown used to. I was replaceable here, invisible, just another body to scrub and clean and disappear. The rain soaked through my thin jacket in the seconds it took to reach the SUV. The back door opened before I touched it, and I slid inside into leather and warmth and the overwhelming presence of Dante Marchesi. He looked different in daylight, sharper somehow, more real. Black sweater instead of a suit, but no less intimidating. His hair was slightly damp from the rain, and he watched me with those dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my face, my cheap, wet clothes, the exhaustion I knew was written in every line of my body. "You came," he said softly. "I'm an idiot." His smile was quick and genuine, transforming his face into something almost boyish. "No, you're brave. Reckless, maybe, but brave." He reached past me to pull the seatbelt across my body, his arm brushing against my chest in a way that made me stop breathing. His fingers lingered at my hip where he clicked the belt into place, and the casual intimacy of the gesture sent heat flooding through me. "You should be more careful, Amara," he murmured, his face still close to mine. "Braver, yes, but more careful." The SUV pulled away from the curb, driven by a man built like a tank. Another sat in the passenger seat. Both of them silent as ghosts, their eyes constantly moving, scanning for threats I couldn't see but knew were there. "Where are we going?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "Somewhere private." He settled back against the leather, but his body angled toward mine, taking up space in a way that felt both protective and predatory. "I don't like sharing." "Sharing what?" "Your attention." His eyes locked onto mine. "Your time." A pause, heavy and deliberate. "You." The possessiveness in his voice should have sent me scrambling for the door. Should have had me demanding he stop the car and let me out. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in my stomach, made my pulse race for reasons that had everything to do with want and nothing to do with fear. "You don't know me," I managed. "I know enough." He leaned closer, and I could smell rain and cologne and something uniquely him. "I know you work 2 jobs that barely pay enough to keep you alive. I know you live in a building with broken locks and heat that doesn't work. I know you haven't seen a doctor in over 2 years because you can't afford insurance. I know you send money back to family in Lagos every month, even though you can barely feed yourself." Each fact was a punch to the gut because he was right about all of it. The building with the broken front door that let anyone walk in, the radiator that clanked and sputtered and never quite kept the cold out, the tight feeling in my chest that I'd been ignoring because emergency rooms asked questions about insurance and employment that I couldn't answer. The wire transfers to my cousin who was raising her 3 kids alone after her husband died. "How do you—" But I knew. Of course I knew. Men like him didn't exist without information, without knowledge, without knowing everything about everyone who crossed their path. "Don't be angry," he said, reading my expression with unsettling accuracy. "Be smart. If I found all this in 3 days, anyone could. And that makes you vulnerable. I don't like that. I've been managing just fine. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. Have you? Is that why your manager touches you when he thinks no one's watching? Why the line cook follows you to your car? Why you take the long route home to avoid the men who've started noticing you? Each word was perfectly aimed, striking at truths I'd been trying to ignore. Marco's hands that lingered too long on my waist, my shoulders, the small of my back. Tony's eyes that tracked me through every shift, hungry and patient. The 3 blocks I'd added to my walk home every night to avoid the corner where dealers had started calling out to me, offering things I didn't want but knew some girls accepted out of desperation. I handle it, I whispered, but my voice cracked on the words. You shouldn't have to. His hand moved to my face, cupping my jaw with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. Not anymore. The SUV turned down a private road, tall iron gates opening automatically as we approached. We drove through what looked like a small forest, dense and dark even in daylight, before a house emerged from the trees. Not a house, a mansion. All modern glass and stone, beautiful and cold and isolated like a fortress designed to keep the world out. Welcome to my home, Dante said as we pulled up to the entrance. A home with armed guards at the gate, with cameras on every corner, with the kind of security that said the owner had enemies who wanted him dead and the resources to try. I should demand to be taken back, should run while I still could. Instead, I let him take my hand and lead me inside. The interior was all clean lines and expensive furniture, more museum than home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the valley, rain streaming down the glass in sheets. A fireplace crackled with real flames, and I realized with a start that I was cold had been cold for so long I'd stopped noticing. Sit, Dante said, guiding me to a leather sofa near the fire. I'll get you something warm. He disappeared into what I assumed was the kitchen, and I took the opportunity to study the room. No photos, no personal touches, just money and taste and a profound emptiness that made my chest ache. A cage made of glass and stone and $100 bills. He returned with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Real hot chocolate, the kind made with cream and melted chocolate, topped with whipped cream. The kind I hadn't had since my grandmother died. Since the last Christmas we'd spent together in Lagos before everything fell apart. How did you know? I asked, wrapping my frozen fingers around the warm ceramic. Your eyes. He sat beside me, close enough that our thighs touched. When I mentioned lunch, you looked hungry, not for food exactly, for something else. Comfort, maybe. Warmth. This seemed right. He'd seen that. In a phone call, in a glance, he'd read me that completely. I sipped the chocolate, and it was perfect, sweet and rich, and exactly what I needed without knowing I needed it. Thank you. You don't have to thank me, Amara. I take care of what's mine. I'm not yours. His smile was slow and dangerous. Not yet. The words hung between us like a promise and a threat. I should argue, should put distance between us, should remember the articles I'd read, the violence he was capable of, the bodies that had piled up in his wake. But the fire was warm, the chocolate was perfect, and for the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel invisible. Why me? I asked quietly. You could have anyone. Why a broke waitress who insulted you? He set his mug down and turned to face me fully. His hand found my hair, fingers threading through the damp coils with a tenderness that made my chest ache. Because you saw me, he said simply. Not the name, not the reputation, not the fear. Just me. And you weren't afraid to call me on my bullshit. His thumb traced to the shell of my ear. Do you know how rare that is? How fucking rare it is for someone to look me in the eye and see a man instead of a monster? You are a monster, I whispered, but there was no conviction in my voice. Yes, he didn't deny it, didn't flinch. But maybe I can be your monster. Maybe I can be the thing that stands between you and everything else in this world that wants to hurt you. His words should have sent me running. Instead, they burrowed under my skin, found the lonely, scared parts of me that had been surviving for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to live. I don't need saving. Everyone needs saving, Tesoro. Some of us are just better at pretending we don't. His hand moved to my neck, fingers spanning my throat in a way that was both gentle and possessive. Let me take care of you. Let me give you everything you've been denying yourself. In exchange for what? You, just you. Your time, your attention, your presence in my life. His eyes burned into mine. I'm not a good man, Amara. I've done things that would make you sick. I've killed people who begged for mercy. I've destroyed families and businesses and lives without losing sleep. But I'm very good at protecting what's mine, and I want you to be mine. My heart hammered against his palm where it rested at my throat. This is insane. Probably. His smile was crooked, almost vulnerable. But I haven't been able to think about anything else since Friday. You're in my head, under my skin. I've killed men for less disruption to my peace. The casual mention of murder should have horrified me. It did horrify me. But it also made something dark and forbidden unfurl in my chest. The knowledge that this dangerous, powerful man was obsessed with me. Plain, struggling, invisible Amara. I don't know anything about your world, I said. Good. I don't want you knowing. I want you separate from all of that. Clean. Safe. His thumb stroked along my jaw. I want you here, in this house, where nothing can touch you. That sounds like a prison. Maybe. His eyes held mine. But it's a prison with heat and food and safety. A prison where you'll never have to smile at men who treat you like shit. A prison where you can sleep without worrying about money or violence or anything except you, I finished. Except me. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips. Say yes, Amara. Let me take you away from that life. Let me give you everything. I should say no. Every rational part of my brain screamed to run, to get back to my normal, safe, predictable life of struggle and invisibility. But then I thought about Marco's hands, Tony's eyes, the apartment with its broken locks and cold radiator, the bone-deep exhaustion of surviving instead of living, the loneliness that had become so normal I'd stopped fighting it. And I thought about Dante, dangerous, obsessive, possessive Dante, who looked at me like I was precious, who'd learned my favorite childhood drink, who wanted to build a cage around me made of safety and protection and something that felt dangerously close to worship. If I say yes, I whispered, what happens? His smile was triumphant and tender all at once. Everything changes. You quit both jobs tonight, you move in here tomorrow, and you become mine in every way that matters. That's crazy. Yes. He cut me off with a kiss, soft and claiming, and absolutely certain. His lips moved against mine like a brand, marking me, changing me, ruining me for anything that came before. When he pulled back, my head was spinning, my body singing with want and fear and need all tangled together. Say yes, he whispered against my mouth. Let me keep you. Let me own you. Let me make sure nothing ever hurts you again. And God help me. I heard my voice, small and scared and certain, say the word that would change everything. Yes. The next morning arrived too fast and too slow all at once. I woke in my apartment for the last time, surrounded by boxes I'd hastily packed the night before. Not that there was much to pack. 2 years in this city, and my entire life fit into 4 cardboard boxes and 3 garbage bags, clothes that had seen better days, books in English and Italian that I'd read until the covers fell apart, my grandmother's rosary, the one thing of value I owned, photos of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Dante had wanted to send movers. I'd refused, clinging to some last shred of independence even as I surrendered everything else. We'd compromised. I would pack alone, but his men would come at 9 to transport everything. I sat on my bare mattress at 8:30, staring at the water stain on the ceiling I'd memorized over 1,000 sleepless nights, and wondered what the fuck I was doing. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, but I knew who it was before I opened it. Eat breakfast. My men will be there in 30 minutes, and Amara, no second thoughts. You're mine now. The possessiveness should have angered me. Instead, it sent a flutter through my stomach that I refused to examine too closely. I typed back, "Bossy." His response was immediate. "You have no idea, but you will." The promise in those words made heat pool low in my belly. I forced myself up, made instant coffee with the last of my supplies, and waited. They arrived exactly on time. 3 men in dark suits who moved through my apartment with military precision, loading boxes into a black SUV with tinted windows. The same one from yesterday. The same silent driver who'd taken me into Dante's world and somehow, impossibly, made me want to stay. "Miss Okafor," the largest of the 3 addressed me, his accent thick Italian. "Mr. Marchesi asked me to give you this." He handed me a phone. Sleek, new, expensive. Not my battered 6-year-old model with the cracked screen and battery that died after 4 hours. "I have a phone," I started. "Not anymore." His expression was impassive. "This one is secure. Mr. Marchesi's number is programmed. So is mine. I'm Luca, head of his personal security. You need anything, you call one of us." The weight of what I'd agreed to settled heavier on my shoulders. New phone, guards, a life I didn't recognize. "What if I want to call my family?" I asked. "My friends?" Luca's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You can call anyone you want, Miss Okafor. Mr. Marchesi isn't keeping you prisoner. He's keeping you safe. There's a difference." Was there? I wasn't sure anymore. The drive to Dante's house, my new home, I had to remind myself, took 45 minutes through morning traffic. I sat in the back seat, clutching my old phone like a lifeline, watching the city I knew disappear behind tinted glass. We passed through the gates, up the long driveway, and my stomach clenched when I saw him standing at the entrance. Dante, in dark jeans and a fitted black t-shirt that showed off a body I'd only imagined beneath expensive suits. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it, and when our eyes met, something hot and possessive flared in his gaze. He opened my door before Luca could, his hand extended. "Welcome home, tesoro." Home. The word felt foreign on my tongue. "Home," he confirmed, pulling me close. He smelled like coffee and cologne and something uniquely him that I was already starting to crave. "How do you feel?" Terrified, excited, insane. I met his eyes. All of it at once. His smile was slow and approving. "Good. You should feel all of that. It means you understand what you've agreed to." Do I? The question came out smaller than I intended. Do I really understand? Instead of answering, he led me inside. The house looked different in morning light, less intimidating, almost beautiful. Sun streamed through those massive windows, turning everything golden and warm. "Your things will go in the east wing," he said, guiding me through rooms that blurred together in my overwhelmed state. "Your bedroom is next to mine." "Next to?" I stopped walking. "Not with." He turned to face me, his expression serious. "I want you in my bed, Amara. Eventually. But I'm not a monster, despite what you think. You'll have your own space until you're ready to share mine. The considerations surprised me. Everything about this man surprised me. The tenderness wrapped in violence, the gentleness in those killers' hands. He pushed open a door, and I stepped into a room that took my breath away. Massive windows overlooking the valley, a bed that could fit 4 people, furniture that probably cost more than I'd made in my entire life, soft creams and golds and touches of deep green that made the space feel warm, lived in mine. This is mine? My voice cracked. Everything here is yours. He moved behind me, his hands settling on my shoulders, his breath warm against my ear. The closet is full. I had clothes brought in based on your size from the restaurant uniform. If you don't like them, we'll get different ones. There's a bathroom through that door, fully stocked. And this. He pressed something into my hand. A credit card, black and heavy, with my name embossed on it. I can't. You can. You will. His hands tightened on my shoulders. No more struggling, Amara. No more choosing between food and rent. No more of that shithole apartment with broken locks. You're under my protection now. That means you want for nothing, understand? I turned in his arms, needing to see his face. Why are you doing this? Because I can. Because I want to. Because the thought of you struggling while I have everything makes me fucking insane. His hand cupped my face, tilting it up. Because you are mine now, and I take care of what's mine. I'm not a possession. Aren't you? His eyes burned into mine. You agreed, Amara. You said yes. That makes you mine in every way that matters. He was right, and the realization sent equal parts fear and desire coursing through me. I had agreed. I had said yes to this beautiful, dangerous man who looked at me like I was oxygen. I need to call my jobs, I said, clinging to practicality because everything else felt too overwhelming. Tell them I quit. Dante's jaw tightened. Already done. What? I called both places last night, told them you wouldn't be returning, paid out the rest of the month as severance. Anger flared hot and bright. You had no right. I had every right. He pulled me closer, eliminating the space between us. You're mine now. That means I make decisions about your safety, your well-being, your life. And I decided you're never setting foot in those places again. Never smiling at drunk businessmen who look at you like meat. Never letting Marco put his fucking hands on you. Never scrubbing toilets for people who don't even know your name. His voice had gone dark, dangerous, and I could see the violence lurking just beneath the surface. The monster he usually kept leashed. This is insane, I whispered, but I didn't pull away. Yes. He kissed my forehead, tender despite the possession in his voice. But you knew that when you said yes. You knew what I was, what I'd be, and you said yes anyway. A knock at the door interrupted us. Luca's voice, urgent. Boss, Castellano is here. Dante cursed in Italian, a string of words I recognized as particularly creative. I have to take this meeting. It's important. Okay. But he didn't let me go far. His hand caught my wrist, pulled me back. You stay in this wing. Don't go downstairs while I'm meeting with him. Luca will be outside your door. Am I a prisoner? The question came out sharper than I intended. No, you're protected. His eyes searched mine. Castellano is dangerous, old school. He doesn't respect boundaries, and I don't trust him not to see you as leverage. So you stay here where I know you're safe. Please. The please did something to me. This man who commanded armies, who killed without remorse, who took what he wanted, he was asking, not demanding. Okay, I agreed softly. Relief flooded his expression. He kissed me then, hard and claiming, a brand that said I was his and he was keeping me. When he pulled away, my lips felt swollen, my body humming with need. I'll come find you when it's done, he promised. We'll have lunch, and I'll show you the rest of the house. Your house now." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in a bedroom bigger than my entire apartment had been, surrounded by luxury I'd never imagined, trapped in a golden cage I'd walked into with my eyes wide open. I explored the space slowly, running my hands over furniture that felt like silk, opening the closet to find it packed with clothes in my size, designer labels I recognized from magazines, dresses and jeans and sweaters in colors that would actually look good on my skin tone. Someone had paid attention, had cared enough to choose things that would make me feel beautiful. The bathroom was marble and chrome with a tub big enough to swim in and products that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to be. My old life felt like a dream, a bad dream I was finally waking up from. I was arranging my pathetically few belongings, books, photos, my grandmother's rosary, on the nightstand when I heard voices, raised voices coming from downstairs. Italian, fast and angry. I shouldn't listen. Dante had told me to stay away. But curiosity and concern pulled me to the door, easing it open just enough to hear. "Stupido, Marchesi." A voice I didn't recognize. Older, harsh, full of contempt. "Stupida decisione. A girl? You're getting soft over una puttana negra." A black whore. The words hit me like a physical blow, sharp and vicious and designed to cut. I'd heard variations of it before, knew that some people would always see my skin before they saw me. But hearing it here, in this house that was supposed to be safe, made bile rise in my throat. The sound that followed was flesh meeting flesh, a body hitting a wall. Then, Dante's voice, quiet and absolutely deadly. "Say that word again about her, and it will be the last thing you ever say. She is under my protection. That makes her untouchable. Spread the word, Castellano. Anyone who disrespects her, anyone who even looks at her wrong, answers to me personally." Silence. Heavy and loaded. Then Castellano's voice, sneering. "You're getting soft, boy. Love makes men weak, makes them stupid. Then I'll be weak and alive while my enemies are strong and dead." Dante's voice had gone cold, flat, terrifying. "Now get the fuck out of my house, and tell the families if they have a problem with my choices, they can take it up with me. We'll see who's still standing when the dust settles." Footsteps, a door slamming, then nothing. I stood frozen, heart pounding, processing what I'd heard. He'd defended me. To someone important, someone dangerous. He'd made me untouchable with a few words and the implicit threat of violence. But he'd also just painted a target on both our backs. The door opened, and Luca appeared, his grizzled face serious. "Miss Okafor, Mr. Marchesi asked me to—" He stopped, taking in my expression. "You heard." Not a question. I nodded. "Good." His expression softened slightly. "Then you understand. You're not just some girl he's fucking around with. You're protected. That means something in our world. It means everything." "I don't understand your world," I whispered. "You don't have to. You just have to trust that he'll keep you safe from it." Luca's voice was gentle. "I've worked for the Marchesi family for 25 years. I watched Dante grow up, watched him become the man he is. And I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you, like you're air and he's drowning." The words settled around me like a blanket, warm and suffocating all at once. Dante appeared behind Luca, his knuckles slightly red, his expression thunderous. But when he saw me, something shifted. The rage melted away, replaced by concern. "You heard," he said, echoing Luca's words. "Some of it." He dismissed Luca with a nod and stepped into my room, closing the door behind him. We stood there, staring at each other across expensive carpet, the air thick with unspoken things. "I won't apologize," he said finally, "for what I am, what I do. But I will promise you this. You'll never be touched by any of it. You'll never be in danger because of me. I'll burn this city down before I let anything happen to you." "That's not normal," I managed. "This isn't how—" "I'm not normal people." He crossed to me in 3 strides, his hands framing my face. "I'm a killer, Amara, a criminal, a monster who does monstrous things. But I'm your monster now, and monsters are very, very good at protecting what they love." Love. The word hung between us, too big, too soon, too real. "You don't love me," I whispered. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." His thumb brushed across my lips. "And I'll learn the rest. I'll learn every scar, every fear, every dream you've buried. And I'll give you everything you've ever wanted and things you didn't know to want." That's what love is, Tesoro. It's obsession and possession and the willingness to destroy anything that threatens it. His definition of love should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been, to arms that felt safer than anything I'd ever known. "I'm still scared," I admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you careful." He kissed me softly, a promise sealed with lips and breath and the beating of 2 hearts that had somehow, impossibly, begun to sink. "But trust me to keep you safe. Trust me, Amara. Let me have you. Let me keep you. Let me show you what it means to be mine." And despite every rational thought screaming at me to run, I found myself leaning into him, letting his arms close around me, letting myself believe, just for a moment, that maybe monsters could love after all. 3 weeks passed like a fever dream, beautiful and disorienting and occasionally terrifying. I woke each morning in silk sheets that smelled like lavender, in a room flooded with sunlight, to the sound of Dante's voice drifting through the wall between our bedrooms. Always on the phone, always in Italian, always that edge of danger beneath the smooth words. Sometimes I'd press my ear to the wall and just listen, letting the familiar cadence wash over me like a lullaby made of threats and power. He kept his promise about my space, never pushed, never demanded access to my bedroom, though I caught him watching me with hunger that made my skin burn. We'd have breakfast together, him in suits before meetings, me in the expensive clothes that were starting to feel less like costumes. He'd ask about my day, my sleep, whether I needed anything. Always attentive, always present, always making me feel like I was the center of his universe, even when I knew he was managing an empire built on violence. But the touching increased gradually, naturally, a hand at the small of my back as we walked through the house, fingers threading through mine during dinner, his lips brushing my temple when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Each touch felt like a question. "Are you ready yet? Can I have more?" I wasn't sure what my answer was, until I was. The house became familiar in those weeks. I learned which rooms Luca monitored from his security station, where Dante took his business calls, which window offered the best view of the valley at sunset. I spent hours in the library, a room I'd discovered on day 4, floor-to-ceiling books in Italian and English, leather chairs worn soft with use. It was the only room that felt lived in, and I wondered how many nights Dante had spent here alone, reading in the dark, waiting for something he couldn't name. But I also learned the other side of his life. The men who came and went at odd hours, speaking in low voices that cut off when I appeared. The phone calls that made his expression go cold and flat. The nights he returned late with blood on his cuffs that he tried to hide before kissing my forehead and telling me not to wait up. I was living in a beautiful lie, and we both knew it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I'd spent the afternoon in the library, curled up with Italian poetry, when raised voices shattered the peace. Not from downstairs this time, but right outside the library door. "Castellano doesn't give a fuck what you think is off limits," Luca's voice, urgent and worried. "He's threatening to go to the other families. He's saying you've gone soft over some girl, that she's making you weak, making you vulnerable. Let him try. Dante's voice was sharp with fury. Let them all try. She's off limits, non-negotiable. They're planning something, boss. I can feel it. Castellano and the Russians. They're moving pieces, testing boundaries, and she's the obvious target. A crash. Something hitting the wall. Then we'll be ready. Increase security on the house. No one gets within a mile of her without my knowing. And Luca, his voice dropped, went deadly calm. If anything happens to me, you get her out. You take her somewhere safe, and you make sure she never comes back to this life. You give her money, a new identity, whatever she needs to disappear. Understood? Understood. My hands shook around the book. If anything happens to me. The words were a knife to the chest, cutting through the comfortable fantasy I'd been building. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was real. The danger, the violence, the very real possibility that Dante could die because men like him always died eventually, violently, alone. The door opened and he appeared, his expression thunderous until he saw me. Then it softened, transformed by something that looked dangerously like love. You heard. Third time in 3 weeks. Yes. I set the book down with careful precision. Are you in danger? Always. He crossed to me, kneeling in front of my chair so we were eye level. That's the life, Tesoro. There's always someone wanting to take what you have, to prove they're stronger, smarter, more ruthless. Is this about me? My voice cracked. Are you in more danger because of me? His hands found my face, thumbs stroking away tears I hadn't realized were falling. No, listen to me. They're using you as an excuse, but they'd find another one if you weren't here. Men like Castellano don't need reasons to challenge power. They just need opportunity. Maybe I should leave. No. The word was sharp, final, edged with something close to panic. Don't even think it. You're not going anywhere. But if I'm making things worse, you're making things better. He kissed me, hard and desperate. You're the only good thing in my life, Amara. The only clean thing. I come home to you, and for a few hours I get to pretend I'm not the monster everyone thinks I am. Don't take that away from me. Please. The vulnerability in his voice undid something in me. This powerful, dangerous man was begging me to stay, to keep being his light in the darkness. How could I say no to that? Okay, I whispered. I'll stay. Relief flooded his features. He pulled me from the chair into his lap on the floor, holding me like I might disappear if he let go. We sat there among the books and dusty sunlight, two broken people clinging to each other in a house that felt increasingly like a fortress under siege. I need to ask you something, he said finally, his lips against my hair. Okay. Move into my room. Not a question despite his words. I need to know you're safe. I need to be able to reach you if something happens. And selfishly, his arms tightened. I need to fall asleep knowing you're next to me, that you're real, that this isn't some dream I'm going to wake up from. My heart hammered. Moving into his room felt like crossing a line, like admitting something I wasn't sure I was ready to admit. But when I thought about sleeping alone, separated from him by a wall when danger was circling closer. Okay, I heard myself say. Tonight. His exhale was shaky against my neck. Thank you. That night, I moved my few belongings into his bedroom. It was different from mine, darker, more masculine, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire property. I could see the security station from here, the guards patrolling the perimeter, the cameras tracking every approach, a general's view of the battlefield. The bed was massive, covered in dark gray sheets that smelled like him. I stood beside it, suddenly nervous as Dante emerged from the bathroom in just sleep pants, his chest bare. He was beautiful, all lean muscle and olive skin with scars that told stories I probably didn't want to know. A tattoo covered his left side, Italian words winding from his ribs to his hip. I squinted, trying to read them in the low light. Il sangue è più denso dell'acqua, he said, noticing my attention. Blood is thicker than water, family, motto. Your family, I started. Are mostly dead, he said matter-of-factly, without emotion. My father was killed 4 years ago. My mother drank herself to death when I was 15. I have a sister somewhere in Europe, but we don't speak. This life, he gestured vaguely. It doesn't leave room for much family. I'm sorry. Don't be. I've made my choices. He crossed to me, his hands settling on my hips over the silk nightgown he'd bought me. Black and expensive and far too revealing. But you're my family now, the only one that matters. The weight of that statement settled on my shoulders like a crown. I was his family, his everything. The pressure should have crushed me. Instead, it felt like being seen for the first time in my life. He pulled back the covers, waiting. I slid in, and the sheets were cool against my heated skin. He followed immediately, pulling me against his chest, his arm heavy across my waist. Sleep, tesoro, he murmured into my hair. I've got you. Nothing touches you while I'm here. But sleep didn't come easily. I lay there hyper-aware of every point where our bodies touched, of his breath evening out as he drifted off, of the steady beat of his heart against my back. This man, this killer, this criminal, this monster, held me like I was something precious, something worth protecting, something worth dying for. Somewhere around 3 a.m, I woke to find him gone. Panic seized my chest until I saw him standing at the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian in a voice that made my blood run cold. Castellano, 24 hours. Prepare the men. If he wants war, we'll give him war. But he touches her. He even looks at her, and I'll make sure he dies screaming. Are we clear? He ended the call and turned, finding me awake and watching. Go back to sleep, he said softly, crossing back to the bed. What's happening? Nothing you need to worry about. He slid in beside me, pulling me close again. Dante. He tilted my chin up, his eyes serious in the moonlight. I told you. You don't need to know about that part of my life. You're separate from it, clean from it. That's how it stays. But if you're in danger, I'm always in danger. So are you by being with me. But I'll die before I let anyone hurt you. That's the promise I made when you said yes. That's the promise I'll keep until my last breath. The conviction in his voice should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like a noose tightening, like the walls closing in on our beautiful cage. I'm scared, I admitted. I know. He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my lips. Soft kisses that tasted like promises and lies and desperate hope. But you're safe here, with me, always with me. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. We made love that night, finally, inevitably, desperately. His hands worshipped every inch of my skin. His mouth traced patterns of possession across my body. His voice murmured Italian endearments that made me shatter in his arms. And when he finally moved inside me, his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that stole my breath. I felt something shift. A line crossed, a point of no return reached. I was his, completely, irrevocably his. Afterward, he held me while I cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of it all. The fear and desire and need and love all tangled together until I couldn't separate one from the other. I love you, he whispered into my hair. I know it's too soon. I know it's insane. But I love you, Amara. You're everything I didn't know I needed, everything I'll never deserve, but refuse to give up. I should tell him I loved him back. Maybe I did. Maybe I'd loved him from that first moment in the restaurant when he'd looked at me like I was visible. But the words stuck in my throat, trapped behind fear and uncertainty and the knowledge that loving a man like Dante Marchesi was signing your own death warrant. Instead, I kissed him, poured everything I couldn't say into the press of lips and tongue and breath. Let my body speak the words my voice couldn't form. He understood. He always understood. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed and the sound of cars outside. Multiple cars. I wrapped myself in one of his shirts and went to the window, looking down at a scene that made my blood freeze. 6 black SUVs lined the driveway. Men in suits, at least 20 of them, stood in formation, weapons visible. And in the center of it all stood Dante, giving orders in a voice that carried up to the window. Every inch the Mafia boss I'd been trying to pretend he wasn't. Luca appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Miss Okafor, Mr. Marchesi asked me to stay with you today. You're not to leave the house for any reason." "What's happening?" "The meeting with Castellano. It's today, earlier than planned." His jaw tightened. Things might get complicated. Complicated. A nice word for violence, for bloodshed, for the very real possibility that the man I'd just given myself to might not come home. I watched from the window as Dante's convoy pulled away, disappearing down the long driveway. He hadn't come up to say goodbye, hadn't kissed me one last time, had just left me here in his shirt, surrounded by his scent, waiting to see if he'd survive the day. The hours crawled by like wounded animals. I tried reading, but the words blurred. Tried eating the lunch Dante's cook prepared, but everything tasted like ash. Mostly, I paced through the library, the living room, back to his bedroom, where his scent still clung to the sheets we'd tangled together just hours ago. Luca followed at a respectful distance, his phone constantly buzzing with updates he wouldn't share. Every time it rang, my heart stopped. Every time he answered in clipped Italian and hung up without expression, I died a little inside. "Please," I finally begged, around 4 in the afternoon. "Just tell me if he's alive." Luca's weathered face softened. "He's alive, Miss Okafor, and he's handling things. That's all I can say." Alive. The word was oxygen, but it wasn't enough. Alive could mean injured, cornered, fighting for his life. Alive could turn to dead in the space between heartbeats. I returned to the bedroom window, the one that overlooked the driveway, and waited. The sun began its descent, painting the valley in shades of amber and blood. Appropriate, I thought bitterly. Everything in Dante's world came back to blood eventually. It was nearly 7 when I heard them. Engines in the distance, growing closer. I pressed my face to the glass, my breath fogging the window as the convoy appeared through the gates. 1, 2, 3 vehicles. Not 6. My stomach dropped. But then I saw him, emerging from the middle SUV, alive and whole, and moving with that predatory grace that made my knees weak. There was blood on his white shirt, spattered across his chest and sleeves. But he was walking, talking, gesturing to his men with the commanding presence of someone very much in control. I ran down the stairs, through the foyer, ignoring Luca's shout of warning. The front door was already opening as I reached it, and then Dante was there, and I was throwing myself into his arms with a sob I couldn't contain. "Tesoro," he breathed into my hair, his arms crushing me against him despite the blood. "I'm here. I'm okay. You're covered in blood. Not mine." He pulled back enough to cup my face, his thumbs wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "Not mine, Amara, I promise." Relief and horror warred in my chest. Not his blood meant someone else's. probably multiple someone else's. The man I loved, because I did love him, I could admit that now in the face of almost losing him, was a killer, had killed today, was standing here with evidence of it painted across his body while holding me like I was the most precious thing in his world. What happened? I managed. Later. First, I need a shower. Then I need you. His eyes burned into mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. I need to wash this day off and bury myself in you until I remember why I do any of this. He kissed me there in the foyer, with his men watching and blood drying on his clothes and the taste of violence on his tongue. And I kissed him back because what else could I do? I was in too deep to swim back to shore, drowning in him and not even trying to save myself anymore. 20 minutes later, he emerged from the bathroom, clean and bare-chested, water still dripping from his hair. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands twisted together, trying to reconcile the man I'd made love to last night with the one who'd come home painted in other people's blood. Castellano is dead, he said simply, pulling on fresh clothes. So are 4 of his top men. The Russians have agreed to stay neutral. The other families have accepted my authority. It's done. You killed him. Not a question. He didn't flinch from it, didn't try to soften it. Yes, he threatened you, Amara, called you a weakness, said he'd use you to bring me down. So I removed the threat. You killed a man because of me. I killed a man because he threatened what's mine. I'd do it again. I'd kill 100 men if they stood between you and safety. He crossed to me, kneeling so we were eye level. Does that make you hate me, knowing what I am, what I'm capable of? I should say yes, should be horrified, disgusted, should run as far and fast as I could from this beautiful monster kneeling before me. But when I looked into his eyes, those dark, dangerous eyes that softened only for me, all I felt was a twisted kind of gratitude. He'd killed for me, had waded through blood and violence to keep me safe. It was sick and wrong, and probably damned us both. But it was also the most protected I'd ever felt in my life. No, I whispered. It doesn't make me hate you. Something in his expression cracked open, vulnerable and raw. Say it. Say what I need to hear, Tesoro. Please. I love you. The words came easier than I expected, truth flowing like water. I love you, Dante. I'm terrified of you and in love with you, and I don't know how to be both. But I am. He surged up, capturing my mouth in a kiss that tasted like relief and possession and desperate need. We fell back onto the bed, his weight pressing me into the mattress, his hands already working at my clothes with fumbling urgency. Say it again, he demanded against my neck. I love you, again. I love you, I love you, I love you. He swallowed the words with his mouth, with his body, claiming me over and over until we were both breathless and shaking. And when we finally collapsed together, tangled and sated, he held me like he'd never let go. Marry me, he said into the darkness. I went rigid in his arms. What? Marry me. Tomorrow, next week, whenever. But marry me, Amara. Make it real. Make it permanent. Make it so no one can ever question that you're mine and I'm yours. My heart raced. Marriage to a mafia boss. A life sentence in this golden cage. But also safety, protection, love from a man who'd burn the world down to keep me safe. A man who looked at me like I was his reason for breathing. That's insane, I managed. We've established that everything about us is insane. His hand found mine in the darkness, threading our fingers together. But I've never been more certain of anything. You're it for me, Tesoro. The only one. The last one. Say yes. Please, say yes. I thought about my old life. The struggling, the loneliness, the constant fear and exhaustion. Then I thought about this life. The luxury, the danger, the overwhelming presence of a man who loved me with frightening intensity. Both lives were cages in their way, but only one cage had Dante in it. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." His kiss was different this time. Softer, reverent, like I was something holy instead of something claimed. "I'll give you everything," he promised. "Every dream you've ever had, every wish you've been too afraid to speak. You'll want for nothing, fear nothing, need nothing except me." "I already need nothing except you," I admitted. "That's what scares me." "Don't be scared. I've got you. I'll always have you." We married 2 weeks later in a small church outside the city, just me and Dante and Luca as witness. I wore a dress Dante had commissioned, cream silk that flowed like water with delicate gold threading that reminded me of my grandmother's favorite sari. He wore a black suit that made him look like sin and salvation wrapped together. The priest, clearly aware of who he was marrying, rushed through the ceremony with nervous efficiency. But when Dante said his vows, his voice was steady, his eyes locked onto mine with burning intensity. "I take you, Amara Okafor, to be my wife, to protect, to cherish, to possess, in sickness and health, in violence and peace, until death tears you from my arms. You are mine, and I am yours, and nothing in this world will ever change that." When it was my turn, I spoke the words that sealed my fate. "I take you, Dante Marchesi, to be my husband, to stand beside, to trust in, to love despite and because of everything you are, until death, and maybe even after. I'm yours." "You may kiss your bride," the priest said, already backing away. Dante's kiss was claiming and tender, public and intimate, a promise and a brand. When we broke apart, I was crying, and he was smiling like he'd just won the greatest prize in the world. "Mine," he whispered against my lips. "Yours," I confirmed. Months passed. The danger didn't disappear. It never would in his world. But it became background noise. There were still late-night phone calls and blood-stained shirts and meetings I wasn't allowed to attend. But there were also morning coffees on the terrace, his hands in my hair while I read aloud in Italian, slow dances in the kitchen to music only we could hear. He taught me about his business, the parts he thought I could handle, investments, properties, the legitimate ventures that funded the illegitimate ones. I taught him about ordinary things. How to cook jollof rice the way my grandmother had shown me. How to find beauty in small moments instead of always preparing for war. We were broken people healing each other in the only way we knew how. Through possession and protection, through whispered promises in the dark, through a love that was probably toxic but felt like salvation. One evening, nearly a year after that first night in the restaurant, I found him in the library. He was reading Italian poetry, his expression distant. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, settling into his lap. "That day, I saw you at Marcello's," he said, closing the book. "You could have stayed quiet, could have let me insult you and moved on with your life. But you didn't. You spoke up, challenged me, changed everything. Do you regret it?" The question scared me, but I needed to know. "Do you wish I'd stayed invisible?" "Never." His arms tightened around me. "You're the best mistake I ever made, tesoro. The most beautiful chaos. You made me remember I'm human beneath the monster, that I'm capable of more than violence and control." "You made me remember I'm worth more than survival," I admitted. "That I deserve to be seen, protected, loved. So we saved each other. Or damned each other." I kissed his jaw. "I'm not sure there's a difference." His laugh was low and warm. "Probably not, but I'll take damnation with you over salvation without you any day." Outside, the sun set over the valley, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. Inside our fortress, wrapped in each other's arms, we were safe. Maybe not happy in the traditional sense. How could we be with blood and violence always lurking at the edges? But we were whole in a way neither of us had been before. He was my monster, and I was his salvation. He was my cage, and I was his freedom. We were twisted and wrong and perfect for each other in ways that defied explanation. And as he carried me to bed that night, his lips finding mine in the darkness, I knew with absolute certainty I'd made the right choice. Saying yes to Dante Marchesi was the best and worst decision of my life, and I'd make it again 1,000 times over. Because some loves aren't meant to be easy or safe or rational. Some loves are meant to consume you, possess you, change you into something new. Some loves are meant to be dangerous, and ours was the most dangerous love of all, but it was ours, mine and his, until death and beyond, forever wrapped in darkness, finding light in each other's arms. Two broken souls who'd somehow managed to create something beautiful from the ruins. That was enough. It would always be enough. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.